My dear friends, tonight begins Shabbos Hagadol, begins the Shabbos preceding Pesach, a powerful, a great Shabbos, a Shabbos of miracles, the Shabbos that began the process of bringing the Korban Pesach, the Paschal Lamb. Let's begin by studying. There's a custom to say the Haggadah or part of the Haggadah on this Shabbos. Let's study a concept from the Haggadah. Something that's not often spoken about, and I personally have not heard much about, though I was always interested in, and that's the charoses. We talk about the matzah, what the matzah represents, the moror, the positioning of moror, when exactly we eat it, the Korban Pesach, the Paschal Lamb, different parts of the Seder, the Dayenu. Those of you who have joined us in the past for our Seders know how entertaining it is, and things are thrown around, and the discussions go till all hours of the night. And unfortunately, this year Hashem has decreed that we're not able to celebrate the Seder together, but let's study some Torah together now that will fortify us and enrich us as we go into Pesach. So let's talk about charoses. I love charoses. It's one of my highlights when we finally we're up to Magid, we're up to the meal, and we've finished eating the moror and so on. Now we can just sit back and enjoy some charoses on the matzah. It's one of my highlights. My mother has a great recipe. My wife has a great recipe. If you'd like the recipe, just let us know. Seemingly, charoses is not a central part of the Seder, sadly. We dip the moror in and then kind of push off the charoses. We shake it off. We put a little bit of charoses in with the sandwich, with the korach sandwich, but what is it up with the charoses? And if we're going to shake it off, why bother? Furthermore, those who are very serious about fulfilling the mitzvah of eating the proper amount of matzah and moror measure or weigh out the proper amount of matzah. They'll have the proper size of the moror. When it comes to the charoses, there's no shear. There's no amount of how much charoses you have to eat. There's no bracha made for it. We make a special bracha for matzah, not just the hamotzi lechem na'aretz, but a special bracha matzah on the Seder night. We make a special bracha for the moror. There's no bracha for the charoses, seemingly indicating that charoses is just not that important. But then why have it? What's the point of charoses? So I found that the Grand Rabbi of Chabad, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, in a commentary of his on the Haggadah, discusses this concept. And he explains, brilliant explanation. But before we get to that explanation, I'd like to ask another question. What better way to answer one question than with another one? The question is, we celebrate the Pesach Seder. We left Mitzrayim. It was awesome. But you know what? We've been subjugated many times since. The era of Hanukkah was one type of subjugation, the danger of Purim, what we've gone through, the Middle Ages, the pogroms, the times when they wanted to destroy us, or the times that we were slaved and we were not free. On a certain degree, right now, we're not free. We have to stay in our homes. We're limited in where we can go, not just legally, but this virus has us held captive. So if we're enslaved or we're subjugated on some level many times since Pesach, what are we celebrating on Pesach? What's the big deal? It was nice while it lasted. It's over. Let's go back. Your favorite sports team celebrates winning the Super Bowl or the World Series or whatever it is. But then when they get in, they lose the next season, or they don't get in. Eventually we stop celebrating the past. Why are we celebrating the past? So let's talk a little bit about the concept that there's no special bracha for charoses. The first Grand Rabbi of Chabad, the Baal HaTanya, says that there are times we don't make a bracha on something, not because it's not so holy, but because it's so holy that the light of that mitzvah doesn't come down to this world. We make a bracha on a physical act in this world. But when the light, the spiritual light, the Or Ruchani is so high, it can't even fully come down to this world, we don't make the bracha because it's too high for the bracha, too high for the blessing. And perhaps that's what's going on with charoses as well. Moror, a certain amount of moror has to be eaten, a certain amount of wine has to be drunk, which tells you that when you have that amount, then it's the amount for the mitzvah. But less than that is not the amount for the mitzvah. It's nice that you drank a little bit of wine. It's nice that you ate a little bit of maror or matzah, but you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. With charosis, every little bit, every drop is a mitzvah. It's something so intensely spiritual that it's above the level of shir. It's beyond the level of a certain amount. Now we find in Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Jewish Law, we find that when it comes to charosis, there's the mitzvah or the obligation to put it on the Seder plate with the other items such as the moror and the shank bone and so on. And there's also a mitzvah to dip the moror into the charosis. Two aspects to charosis: being there, being displayed, and being used. What's the concept here? So, the two aspects of charosis is, on the one hand, charosis represents the subjugation at the hands of the Egyptians. And then there's the moror that represents the enslavement they went through all the generations. The moror actually is not representing Mitzrayim per se, the Egyptians per se. That's charosis. Charosis represents that ultimate, that enslavement which was the beginning of all enslavements. It's kind of like a virus, that there's just a something that's indiscernible. You can't even see it, but yet it can infect so many. The charosis, that little bit, affects, the little bit of charosis is the fulfillment of the mitzvah. Just like the Jews being enslaved in Egypt, that enslavement is like the virus that infects all subsequent enslavements. It's the beginning of everything. So charosis seems like a pretty negative thing. It's the foreshadowing and the foretelling of all the suffering Jews would go through all the generations. But we have a principle that if something's negative, there's a positive expression of it and an even far more powerful positive expression of it. So what is positive about charosis? In order to understand this, we need to go back to the original question we asked about enslavement. Why are we celebrating freedom if we've been enslaved so many times since? And this question was posed to the Maharal of Prague. And the Maharal answers that really what happened was, Ki kasher yotzu Yisrael miMitzrayim, when the Jews left Egypt, kiblu atov be'etzem, they received this inherent goodness, till they were befitting of being free because of who they are. In other words, they changed fundamentally. Klal Yisrael, the Jewish nation, changed fundamentally. We are people of freedom. We're not the same people that we were before. And that never changes. We could be enslaved, we could be subjugated, but at the core, we're people that have freedom. We're people not of slavery, but of freedom. There's a quote that one of our dear friends, Rav Vital Barth, sent me earlier this week, a quote from Rav Kook. It must have been a moment of prophecy because it fits perfectly into the concept that I want to share. Rav Kook writes, Yesh ben chorin, there's a free person. There's a person who's free, a person living a life, doing what they want. Sharucho ruach shalevet, that his spirit, that his core, that the inner working of who he is slavery. He's a slave. Yesh evet sharucho mleach cherut, and there's a slave who his internal spirit, his core is freedom. He's full of freedom. Sure, the proverbial master might be whipping him, and he's got to go to work, and he's got to do, and he can't make his own decisions. But you know what? At the core, he's free. Haneman latmiuto, the one who's true to his true essence, ben choranu, he's free. The one who's honest, who's in line, who's aligned with his true essence, that person's free. But the person who lives a whole life trying to align himself in the perspective of others. Do I fit in with other people, the way other people do things, the way I should be living, the way I should be in their eyes? Whoever, that's a slave. Slavery has nothing to do, and freedom has nothing to do with whether there's somebody standing above me or not. Whether I can go here or I can go there. It's something deep inside of me. I had a mentor, a great mentor. He was a mentor to many, many people. His name was Rabbi Aaron Kreiser. And he was a big person. Physically, he was a large, tall person. And emotionally, not only was he brilliant in Torah, emotionally, he was a source, he was a beacon of strength to so many of us. And actually his yahrzeit, the anniversary of his passing, he passed away. It'll be 22 years in a few days, right before Pesach. Mornings, after services, after davening in the mornings, he would learn with a group of men, they would study Chumash together. The last morning before a group of men, they would study Chumash together. The last morning before he went into the hospital, he was sick for a short while before he passed away. That last morning, he studied something with them that was so amazing. He said, we're told, we just read in the Torah portion a few weeks ago in the Parsha, that when the Jews left Mitzrayim, after Matan Torah, after they received the Torah, they were directed by Hashem to build a Mishkan, to build a tabernacle. And the walls and the outer structure of the tabernacle of the Mishkan was cedar wood posts. The question is, the Jews are in the desert. They're traveling in the desert and they ran out of Egypt as quickly as they were able to. Where did they find trees to make wooden posts and wooden beams? Where did that come from? This is the question Rashi, the primary commentator, poses. And Rashi answers that when Jacob came down to the land of Egypt 210 years earlier, when he came down, more than 210 years, he brought cedar trees with him that he planted in Egypt. Because he knew that eventually his descendants would be redeemed from Egypt, they'd be freed, they'd go into the desert, and they'd have to build a Mishkan, a tabernacle, and they need cedar wood. So he planted that. But you know what that means? That means that when he went down to Egypt, he knew the Jews were going to go through slavery, and they were going to suffer terribly, and it was going to be extremely difficult, harsh situations, and many were going to die. He didn't see slavery, he saw freedom. Even going in to be a slave, he already saw freedom. That's a person of freedom. Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, the forefather of the Jewish nation, the one that the Jewish nation comes from, that Klal Yisrael is founded on. What does he see in darkness? He doesn't see darkness, he sees light. He sees how everything is going to end up with that freedom and that glorious time of receiving a Torah and having Hashem's presence amongst them. That's what he saw. That's a person of freedom. I want to quote to you from one of the great students of Rav Kook. Rav Kook was one of the greatest Kabbalists of the 20th century, and of course the first chief rabbi of Israel. And one of his primary students was Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Charlap. And we have many books from him called Mei Morim. And one of them is actually a commentary on the Haggadah. And he says something amazing, without quoting his teacher, without quoting others. He says this on his own. He explains the words that we begin right after the Manashtana. We begin, Avodim ayinu leparo de Mitzrayim. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. And he says, HaGalut v'hashibut shel Yisrael b'Mitzrayim lo hoya el mitzad chitzoniyutam. This enslavement and the exile of the Jews in Egypt was only on the external level. Within, in the inner workings, the inner machinations of their enslavement, you know what's going on inside of that? Was complete freedom. That immediately with the beginning of the enslavement of the Jews, you know what began? We think about light at the end of the tunnel. Right now I'm enslaved, I'll get out. He says, no, that's a mistake. You know what happened in the first moments of enslavement? Was freedom. Freedom was developing right then, the internal freedom. The second they walk into Egypt, you know what was happening? Was already the coming to fruition of the leaving Egypt. As they're coming in, they're already leaving. It's not slavery. It's a setup for freedom. As someone once said, a setback is a setup for an even greater opportunity afterwards. Even though spiritually they fell very far in Egypt, they fell into the 49th level of impurity, as far as they could go before becoming completely lost. Even though on the external level, in different actions, that's where they were. But you know what shined forth and broke through all those masks of enslavement and all those shells of being subjugated? What broke through all of them was that inner shine of freedom, and they went to eternal freedom. We do many actions during the Seder, many activities that show enslavement. Not to remember the fact that we were enslaved. No, because that slavery was freedom. That was building the freedom. Ba'ofen, listen to these words of Rav Chalap. Ba'ofen shekol meshat zman golutam hayta yitzia arichta. In a sense that the entire extent, the entire time of their enslavement, you know what it was? It was one long freedom. One long leaving Egypt. That's what the experience of being in Egypt was, freedom. One of my mentors, the Rosh Yeshiva, the Dean of Yichayim Berlin Yeshiva, Rabbi Aaron Schachter, he should live and be well, once told us on Pesach, he said, on Pesach we talk about, on Passover we talk about chirus, about freedom. He said, chirus is not freedom, chirus is royalty. It's royalty. It's a whole different level, a whole different way of existing. Now, if my freedom is just because I can do what I want and nobody's telling me what to do, that's a very cheap type of freedom. That's freedom. But if my freedom is something internal inside of me, no matter what's going on outside, that's true freedom. There was a Hasidic rabbi during World War II, known as the Radishitzer Rebbe, who died in the concentration camps. And they wrote a book about him. Students of his wrote a book about him called One Man's Power, One Man's Glory. And in there they write about how in the concentration camps, in the slave labor camps, on Shabbos afternoons, as Shabbos was coming to an end, he would gather in a few broken-hearted Jews, starving Jews, and there was no food, there was nothing there, but he would sit there and he would share words of Torah. And a light would shine forth from him in that group, and they felt like they were truly free. They couldn't leave. They couldn't get food. The Nazis would have shot them dead, but they were free. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avot, in Ethics of Our Fathers, Ezeu Ashir Hasameach Bechelko. Who is wealthy, he is satisfied with his lot. I would say it's nice to be satisfied with your lot. I would also consider Bill Gates pretty wealthy. Warren Buffett's probably doing pretty well. I think we can come up with a number of people that are pretty wealthy. Why not mention that as well? And that question bothered me until a few weeks ago, until the pandemic, and until we saw what a toll it took on the stock market and the economy. We see that if my wealth is because of what I have in my bank account, that's a very poor type of wealth. But if wealth is because of the quality of being satisfied with what I have and that perspective, nobody can ever take that away from me. Ezeu Gibor Akoveshit Yitro. Who is strong? Who's wealthy? Someone who's not wealthy. Who's strong? Who's a powerful person? Do you think it's somebody who could bench press quite a bit? Well, maybe we thought that a few weeks ago, and then we started hearing the terrible stories of young, healthy, vibrant, strong people being felled by an invisible pandemic, by a visible virus. And we realized that strength is not physical strength. True strength is if I can control my urges. If I'm in control of myself, then I'm free, I'm wealthy, and I'm strong. Freedom of Pesach is not a freedom of doing what I want, because I can't do what I want. I can't travel where I'd like to right now. I can't go where I want. I can't get together with the people I want. But that's a cheap type of freedom. Freedom is the inner quality that I can think, that I can connect to Hashem, that I can create something within myself. Last Friday we spoke about the first 12 days of Nisan. And the first 12 days of Nisan are parallel to the 12 months of the year, and each day we want to prepare for another month. Well, Monday ends the 12 days of preparing for the year. We still have a couple of days to do that. But beyond that, we have the month of Nisan, the month of freedom. And freedom is not freedom. Freedom is royalty. Freedom is the opportunity to connect. It's to let go of the shackles of the stories I have about myself and others and start seeing what's really possible and what really could be. You know, charoses is dipped into the moror. It signifies that a Jew is who he is. I'm sorry, the moror is dipped into the charoses, signifying the suffering of a Jew. But the charoses is also placed on the Seder plate. On the one hand, a Jew comes in contact with suffering and subjugation and enslavement and difficult times, and it's been a difficult week. It's been a difficult week, whether people are hurting financially, and in other parts of the country, thank God here things are quiet. In other parts of the country and the world, people are suffering terribly. Many people died this week. That's the charosis coming in contact with the morer. But the positive charosis, just like the negative charosis represents Egypt, which is the beginning of all subjugation and enslavement, the positive charosis is that true freedom. That true freedom that we represent, we place proudly on the Seder plate, because that's the freedom we have within ourselves. May Hashem help that we take these few days leading up to Pesach and we connect to what's called the Orot HaChag, the lights of the holiday, the spiritual lights, the lights of freedom, the lights of royalty. And we realize this is an opportunity to create something great within ourselves, leave go of the shackles of what held us back. And times, I find for myself, I'm having insights and clarity that I never had before. It's times that we can truly connect to the divine, connect to Hashem, connect to something deep within ourselves, find greatness within ourselves. That's the freedom of the holiday of Pesach. That's the cherus within the enslavement, like Rav Chalap says. We're stuck in our houses, but you know what? We're building within ourselves that shining light that's coming out of our homes, the simcha, the joy, the true inner joy that we have, the strength of being in control of ourselves, of making the right decisions. That light will shine forth to the world. And we may merit that this Pesach will be the beginning of something new, of something great for us, for the world, on the physical level, on the spiritual level. And may we merit those true orot, those true lights of the holiday. Chevra, I'm sorry we can't be together in person, but I'm thinking of each of you. I love each of you. And may Hashem help that we'll be together in Yerushalayim speedily in our days.